Well, the Sacramento Kings don't know how to throw a lob pass successfully, but they do know how to beat the bad teams that they are supposed to. Keegan Murray has his first 20-point performance since November. Jonas Valanciunas continues to fill it up off of the bench. And the Sacramento Kings end February on a needed high note, heading into a brutal month of March. You are listening to Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And get out your brooms, everybody. That is a 4-game season sweep of the Utah Jazz at the hands of the Sacramento Kings. The Jazz being right now the worst team in the Western Conference record-wise. Well done by the Sacramento Kings to handle their business tonight, 118-101. The final score, handled their business all season against the Jazz. The Kings would be in a lot worse shape statistically, record-wise, if they hadn't have played the Jazz 4 times this season. But good on the Sacramento Kings to get the job done, because tonight's game got off to a horrible start. Now, of course, I'm not just going to point out the negative in a positive Kings win. Plenty of positives to talk about, but we do have to address how this game got going, because the Kings came out and after a really, really good offensive performance against the Charlotte Hornets a couple nights ago, offensively, they reverted right back, at least early on, to the struggles of really post De'Aaron Fox trade since Zach LaVine came over. Turning the basketball over, 6 turnovers in the first quarter alone. The Kings only scored 22 points in the first quarter. We're tied with the Jazz 22-22 at the end of that first 12-minute period. The offense was bad. The play was sloppy. We're going to talk a little bit more later on in the podcast about that Kings starting unit and how that Kings starting 5 might actually be one of the worst lineups that the Sacramento Kings have been putting out there recently. But they did a good job responding. Right after a 22-point first quarter, they had a 33-point second quarter, which was led by Zach LaVine. LaVine, 0 points in the first quarter, 0 of 2 shooting from the field. He had 13 points in the second quarter, including a trio of threes. He heated right back up really, really quickly, like the same level that he was that he left off with his 18-point fourth quarter when he dropped 42 against the Charlotte Hornets. He had a heat check at one point after hitting a couple of threes back-to-back in that second quarter. Very reminiscent of the fourth quarter. Unfortunately, he airballed it. So I was like, okay, well, Zach, maybe not you might not be able to repeat that flamethrower quarter from a night ago. But he got Sacramento's offense going again, helped them create separation. The Kings had a double-digit lead at halftime. And Zach's game overall, it's not 42 points, but pretty solid offensively. 22 points, 8 rebounds, which you really like to see from LaVine. 3 assists. He was 4 of 8 from three-point range. That three-point shot has come back, right? He came into Sacramento shooting, 42, 43, 44% from three-point range this season with his time with the Chicago Bulls. And his first handful of games with the Sacramento Kings shooting-wise were not great. Well, now he's started to get back to that 40s percentile range. He's knocking down threes at a higher clip. That jump shot is beautiful, right? It's one of the prettiest shots in the NBA. It's good to see it dropping for Zach LaVine. He actually became, according to, I think it was StatMuse that put this out, he is the fastest player in Kings history to score 200 points and make 25 three-pointers. So that's pretty cool. Zach LaVine, I mean, the Kings don't often acquire players like Zach LaVine, and he's come in and offensively done what he's supposed to do at a pretty historic clip in the history of the Kings, that is. So a really good game from Zach LaVine, but the night belonged to Keegan Murray. Right, a big night for Keegan, 26 points, 9 of 16 from the field, 5 of 10 from three-point range, 6 rebounds, and even a couple of blocks. He won the Defensive Player of the Game crown and offensively had his best game since November 24th. He has not scored over 20 points since November 24th. This is just the fourth time this season that Keegan has scored more than 20 points. There were two aspects of this game that I really, really liked. Number one, this was a true showcase of Keegan Murray, the two-way player, right? You got a 20-plus point performance, and you got him playing the best defense on the team, right? I know you're taking on the Utah Jazz. Lauri Markkanen wasn't playing, so it's not like he was matching up against elite talent on the other end. But still, defensively, he carries a lot of the responsibilities, especially with forwards and taller guards. And he did a good job. He did his job defensively tonight. And then on the other end of the floor, he was knocking down shots. He was aggressive. And that leads into the second thing that I really like from this performance from Keegan Murray, how balanced it was, right? How many times this season have we seen Keegan have one or two like really, really good quarters and then disappear or do nothing the other quarters, right? He had a game, it was actually the Dallas game, I believe, on the road, where he didn't even take a shot in the first half. He had 0 points, 0 shot attempts in the first half. Third quarter, he scores 11 points, and then I don't think he scored the remainder of the game, right? And then he had a game even a little bit before that where he had like 17 points in the first quarter alone, ended the game with 19, right? Getting more balanced offensive attack and production from Keegan Murray is a big deal. He scored 6 points in the first quarter, 7 points in the second quarter, 7 points in the third quarter, 6 points in the fourth quarter. A really balanced, involved offensive night. And after the game, he did a television interview with Kyle Draper and Morgan Reagan on the postgame. And one of the things he talked about, and I don't have the quote directly for you, but one of the things he talked about is just, he talked about staying consistent with his preparation, but that he felt like he was more involved tonight. He was intentional about getting more involved. And it was good to see the Sacramento Kings involving him, getting him the ball in those spots, and him taking those shots with confidence. So a really balanced attack from Keegan Murray in this game. That's great to see for the Sacramento Kings. If they can get this two-way version of Keegan, not necessarily on a nightly basis, because he's not all of a sudden going to start averaging 20 points per game. Plus, there's so many other scorers and so many guys that need to take a lot of shots on this roster, he's naturally going to take a bit of a back seat. But if you could get a 17 point per game, two-way shooting around high 30s, bare minimum around 40% from three-point range version of Keegan Murray, you're going to have a lot of success as a team. That's what the Kings need more of from him. Maybe that doesn't live up to that all-star potential that the Kings thought he had when they took him with the 4th overall pick a couple of years ago, but it's still something that's very valuable that this team can absolutely use. So a big night from Keegan Murray, which was great to see. And then Jonas Valanciunas, the big man, right? He's one of the best moves. It's not up there in terms of significance with the like Domantas Sabonis trade necessarily, but Jonas Valanciunas, I think, is one of the best moves of Monte McNair's tenure here in Sacramento. And I'm comfortable and confident saying that already, right? Just a very smart move. It made a ton of sense. It's why we've talked about it for months leading up to when the Kings actually did it at the trade deadline, right? It didn't cost them a lot. They used some of the assets that they got from the De'Aaron Fox trade to go out and get Jonas Valanciunas, and he's rewarded them. Tonight, 15 points, 6 of 7 from the field, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, he even hit a 3, knocked down a 3 at the very, very end of the third quarter off of a pick and pop from Malik Monk, which was great to see. Jonas Valanciunas is a sharpshooter. You heard it here first. But it's like, he's given the Sacramento Kings depth at the center position, which they really lack. No disrespect to like Alex Len and Orlando Robinson. But I mean, those guys didn't really, the Kings didn't have center depth. They didn't. And they haven't for a while. Valanciunas has not only given them center depth, but he's given them someone that, of course, Sabonis is really familiar with their time together on the Lithuanian national team. But Sabonis, who's a naturally physical player, one of the strongest players in the league, comes out of the game and you're bringing Jonas Valanciunas, who plays even bigger and even stronger because he is bigger than Domantas Sabonis is, right? So on a game like this, where Sabonis was struggling, right? He was trying to deal with Walker Kessler, and I thought Kessler was doing a really good job of defending Domantas Sabonis around the rim. Jonas Valanciunas comes in and it's like, okay, you've exerted all that energy trying to handle Sabonis for 35 minutes. Here I am for 14, 15 minutes where I'm just going to bully you in the paint. There's nothing you can do about it. Right, I really like that 1-2 punch, whether they're on the floor together or one is coming in for the other. The Kings just have this really physical 48 minutes of center play. And that's very valuable for Doug Christie's team. And on top of that, right, he holds down minutes 14 minutes tonight. Sabonis played 34, so it's not like he got a ton of rest in this game. It's not like the 27 minutes that he had the other night against Charlotte, but still, he only had to play 34 minutes, which is pretty good considering Sabonis was always in the high 30s to flirting with 40 basically on a nightly basis before the Valanciunas trade. Sabonis tonight, 12 points, 5 of 12 from the field, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is back-to-back games where Sabonis didn't have a double-double. I can't remember the last time that happened. It wasn't his best game, certainly not his most efficient game. He definitely struggled at times in that first half in particular, but he took 12 shots. The Kings didn't play through Sabonis offensively as much as they did against Charlotte, which I would have liked to have seen more of. Of course, I want to see more of the Malik Monk, Domantas Sabonis two-man game that just hasn't gotten consistent enough since the De'Aaron Fox trade. But Sabonis took 12 shots. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see him trying to be aggressive and trying to score, especially after he only took like 6 or 7 against Charlotte the other night. So a lot of things to like from this game and from some of these individual performances, but we do have to talk about this Kings starting unit. And I'm curious how you look at something I want to bring up. There's a glass half full and a glass half empty way of looking at something in regard to the turnovers with the Sacramento Kings. I'm going to present that to you. I want to hear your feedback on that here in just a second. Before that, though, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Robinhood and Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times of the national savings average. The perks of high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in the IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost for more information. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Is the Sacramento Kings starting lineup one of their worst, or maybe even their worst lineup? Now I'm talking about worst lineup that is actively playing, right? Doug Christie could throw out a horrendous lineup of guys at the end of the bench and two-way guys and guys that don't play, of course. But I'm talking about of the lineups that have been playing consistently for the Kings and that Doug Christie is still working out and figuring out. I think the starting lineup is close to one of the worst. Just eye test, some of the numbers, but mainly the eye test, watching them play, it's for sure their most talented 5, right? Monk, LaVine, DeRozan, Murray, Sabonis, right? That is a very, very talented starting 5. I think it's fair to say those are your 5 best players in terms of overall talent. But just because you have a super talented lineup doesn't mean that that lineup is always a good fit together. This has been a consistent conversation that we've had here on Locked On Kings since the Zach LaVine trade. How well does this group fit together? How well are they coexisting? Once again, the start of this game was not very good. Now, the start of the game against Charlotte was better than this, but you had Keon Ellis check into that game 4 minutes in. In this game, the Kings got off to a really, really bad start in that first quarter. Doug Christie didn't make a change to his lineup until the 6:21 mark in the first quarter. Keon Ellis checking in for Malik Monk. Then you had the third quarter where it got off to another horrendous start. Right? This time, Keon Ellis checked in at the 8:14 mark of the third quarter and replaced Zach LaVine. And at that point, the Jazz had started the second half on a 11-5 run to cut into that Kings lead. Well, the Kings, as soon as Keon Ellis came into the game, the Kings then went on a 12-3 run to build their lead back up and really never looked back from that point. So here you have like multiple examples of as soon as mainly Keon Ellis checks into the game, but as soon as Doug Christie changes that starting lineup, typically we start to see a little bit better, more fluid, basketball. It just feels a lot more balanced than that starting unit. On top of that, turnovers continue to be a problem for this team. 16 total turnovers in this game, resulting in 19 Jazz points. 9 of those turnovers were from Kings starters. So naturally, the starters are playing the most minutes. So more often than not, if you have a lot of turnovers, the starters are going to wear a majority of them. But 9 of your 16 turnovers coming from your starting unit, that's stuff that you have to clean up. And I just don't feel like this starting unit is very effective. I don't know if we're any closer, especially after back-to-back wins, if we're any closer to Doug Christie making a change to that starting lineup. He didn't make one after that really disappointing Warriors loss. I don't think he's going to make any, at least going into the month of March in the Kings' next game on Saturday against the Houston Rockets. But we got to keep paying close attention to this starting unit, because there's times where it can get them into trouble. And that kind of leads into the next part of this podcast, is the glass half full or glass half empty view of this team working through those turnover issues, right? And I'm presenting both of these. I lean more towards the glass half empty side. I know, surprise, surprise, pessimistic Matt George leaning more glass half empty. But I'm curious how you feel about this, right? There's 2 different ways that you can look at these turnover issues and this team struggling to get on the same page. Here's the glass half empty. The Kings are really struggling taking care of the basketball, even against bad teams like the Pelicans, the Jazz, the Hornets, right? The Warriors aren't necessarily a bad team, but they turn the ball over 24 times against Golden State, right? The Kings are not doing a good job taking care of the basketball. They're winning games still because they're playing lesser opponents. But if these turnover issues continue going into the month of March and the brutal schedule that they have in the month of March, the Kings are going to get destroyed because of this issue. And they're only going to take on better defensive teams that are more aggressive with their steals, who know that this is a weakness of the Kings, who are going to look to jump passing lanes, frustrate ball handlers, and try and create as much chaos as possible and turn you over as much as possible. That's what's facing the Sacramento Kings. So the glass half full or half empty way of looking at it is, you're struggling to take care of the ball against the bad. So how bad is it going to be against the good, right? But here's the glass half full way of looking at it. And I understand this viewpoint. The Kings have had a fortunate stretch of schedule against weaker opponents for them to figure this issue out. So regardless of who they were playing with, incorporating all these guys and trying to get everybody on the same page and really not having an established point guard, losing De'Aaron Fox, you're naturally going through these growing pains and figuring out how to play together, and the turnovers are a result of all these changes, a kink that you're trying to work out. You've had a fortunate schedule so that even though you are going through these necessary games to figure each other out, you could still win games because they're against lesser opponents. It's easier to work through things against bad teams than it is against the great teams that'll kill you right away for it, maybe take some of the wind out of your sails or discourage you. So I understand if people go, Matt, it's like good thing that they had this schedule after the trade deadline, because this has given them the time to work through it. Now that they've gotten 6, 7, 8, however many it's been, games under their belt where, yes, turnovers have been a problem, they're going into a harder stretch where now they're more comfortable playing together. So hopefully the turnovers will go down as they're more comfortable together, and those turnover issues will go down as better competition is coming through. I, again, subscribe more towards the glass half empty view. I think the glass half full is a little too optimistic for me based off of how bad the turnover issues have been for the Kings so far since the Zach LaVine trade. But if you feel the other way, let me know why. At MattGeorgeSack on Twitter or X. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Of course, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. When they swish, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. Any player at all, it doesn't have to be a King. Any player scores 50 or more in a game, it could even be against the Kings, during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members will get 50% off of an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight, whether you're getting a game day feast chowing down as you're getting ready to watch some Sacramento Kings basketball. You have some late night cravings after the game before going to bed. You're needing lunch on the go, or maybe it's a busy day at work, or you're out with the family on the weekend, or fueling your watch party if you're getting people together to watch some Sacramento Kings basketball. DoorDash has you covered for all of that and more. Sign up for the Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, any player at all, Dash Player members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. So I have one more negative thing to discuss, and then we'll end on a significant positive, okay? I want to talk a little bit about Malik Monk. I'm not down at all on Malik Monk as a player, but I've lost not all of my belief, but a good chunk of my belief in Malik Monk and his ability as the primary point guard, the primary ball handler, the primary floor general for the Sacramento Kings. I said earlier that I thought how Malik stepped into that role was going to be the key to how successful this Kings team can be for the remainder of this season. Over the last 2 seasons, he's shown off how valuable he can be. It's an underrated skill set of his as a floor general, as a facilitator, as a playmaker, and someone with the ball in his hands. And there's absolutely no doubt about it that even when De'Aaron Fox was here, he was the best pick and roll ball handler on the team, right? He honestly, De'Aaron Fox really couldn't hold a candle to Malik Monk running the pick and roll as the guard. None of that has changed. But being the team's main playmaker and facilitator is a whole nother level. And it's a level that Malik Monk has, quite frankly, struggled with, right? There was a moment in this game where, I think it was in the first half, Markelle Fultz played. He came in to play alongside Malik Monk a little bit. And Katie Christensen was talking on the broadcast, like, how great is it that the Kings have Markelle Fultz now that come in so Malik Monk can play more as a shooter and play off the ball a little bit more? If we're already having this conversation with someone who joined the Kings as a free agent after the Kings traded away or got rid of all of their point guard depth, if we're having that conversation and pointing that out already, and it's true, it's right, like Malik Monk is really good off the ball, and Malik Monk is a really good option as a catch and shoot 3-point threat. But if we're already having this conversation this quickly, then maybe Malik Monk as your future primary point guard and primary ball handler is not a very successful route. And this is not a anti-Malik Monk take. It's not like I'm out on Malik Monk as a player. I just don't think this is the correct way to use Monk. Monk is very valuable as a secondary option, as a secondary ball handler. But I think it's very, very clear how much he benefited from playing with someone like De'Aaron Fox because of the amount of attention that De'Aaron Fox takes onto himself. Plus, Malik Monk is being guarded by the opposing team's best guards at this point. Not that every single team has crazy good defensive guards. Like the Charlotte Hornets don't. And we saw Malik Monk and Domantas Sabonis have a better two-man game. But the guys that were typically guarding Fox and always keeping an eye on Fox and what he was doing, because Monk and Fox were on the floor a lot at the same time. That's why Mike Brown subbed De'Aaron Fox out first so that he could stagger in the Malik Monk, De'Aaron Fox lineups at times with that second unit, so that both of them had the opportunity and the option to play off ball. It worked really well when they were together. I don't think it works right now consistently enough when it's just Monk by himself trying to work with LaVine and DeRozan, who both need the ball in their hands but aren't the same creators as Fox and Monk are. So personally, I'm not out on it. I still think it can work short term. But if you're going into next season and long-term thinking Malik Monk is our starting point guard going forward, he is our primary ball handler, our primary floor general facilitator, I think you might have problems. Just me personally. That's just how I feel. But let's end on a positive. Let's end on a positive because I think Sacramento Kings fans, you should be very happy with your team right now. Very happy because, look, that Warriors loss stung. It was a crappy way to start the quote-unquote second half of the season. It was a bummer inside the Golden One Center. It sucked. The loss before the All-Star break to the New Orleans Pelicans in overtime when CJ McCollum absolutely owned the Kings, that was disappointing. But in reality, with the exception of those games, beating the Pelicans a couple of times, nearly sweeping the Pelicans, sweeping the Utah Jazz, completely manhandling the Charlotte Hornets, and even during beating the Dallas Mavericks on the road during Doug Christie's 7-game win streak when the Kings were beating a lot of shorthanded teams. Some people can use that and present that as a negative. Ultimately, the Kings can only play the teams that are placed in front of them. And when they've played teams that were shorthanded because of injuries or teams that were just flat out worse than the Kings, more often than not, the Kings have won those games. And especially recently, they're beating bad teams with a big margin. They're beating bad teams comfortably. That's a really good sign. I give Doug Christie a ton of credit for keeping this Kings team, keeping their eyes on the prize, right? Keeping them locked in. This game, like the name on the front of the jersey it's nameless. There is no name on the front of the jersey. We play the same teams every single way. And what we're seeing is the Kings are more than good enough against those bad teams to wipe the floor with them more often than not. Now the question becomes, what does it look like against the best teams in the league? Because that's what's coming up next, right? You end February with 2 really good wins. You're back to 2 games over 500, or is it 3 games over 500? You're above 500. You're feeling pretty comfortable. No, it's 2 games above 500 because the Warriors game tied it or evened things up. So you're 2 games above 500. Still not the best, but you're above 500 because of the games that you've handled. You've given yourself at least a tiny bit of wiggle room in that department. You're very much firmly in that play-in picture as of right now. But now the real work begins, right? You have a couple of days in Houston to practice and to get ready for the Rockets on Saturday. So a couple more days with some practice time and some team bonding time on the road, which I think is a good thing. You're taking on the Rockets, who you've beaten. You've had success against the Rockets before. However, a lot of that success came from De'Aaron Fox being on the team. We'll see how they look against the Rockets now that Fox is no longer here. But it's a winnable game there. You have the Dallas Mavericks and Denver Nuggets to end this road trip. I don't have high expectations for that Denver game. You've beaten the Mavericks already in Dallas once before. You can absolutely go out and do it again. So there are winnable games to wrap up this road trip. Then you have the San Antonio Spurs at home. Look, it's going to be an emotional night. De'Aaron Fox's return to the Golden One Center, whatever reaction he gets, I feel like Fox is going to put on a show. He's going to drop a lot of points. But the Spurs without Victor Wembanyama are not a good basketball team. They're not. The Kings should win that game. So here's a good stretch where you can pick up a handful of games here. The remainder of this road trip, minimum go get one of these games. Go get the Dallas game. Hopefully you can get this Houston game too. But go bare minimum 500 on this road trip. Handle that first Spurs game when you get back. Great. You're feeling pretty good because you're 2, 3, 4 games above 500. And now you're going into what I consider to be like the hell stretch. At Clippers, then home versus the Knicks, at the Warriors, at the Suns, home versus the Grizzlies, home versus the Cavs, home versus the Bulls, home versus the Bucks, home versus the Celtics, home versus the Thunder. We will find out really quickly how for real this team is during that stretch. That is a stretch that can absolutely bury this team and boot them out of the play-in altogether. This is the stretch where if I'm the Phoenix Suns, who also have an extremely difficult schedule, if I'm the Suns, I'm looking at this stretch, which includes a game against the Sacramento Kings. I'm looking at this stretch for the Kings and going, this is where we need them to fall apart. This is where we're going to catch them. If you're the Kings, if you want to move up to 7th or 8th in the play-in, you have to win a good amount of these games. If you want to move up into the top 6, there's no choice. You have to win the vast majority of these games. You want to tread water and stay in that 9th or 10th spot, maybe you have to go 500 over this stretch. But this is going to be a tough stretch where we're really going to learn a lot about this team. And hopefully they've figured some of these things out, the turnover issues, the chemistry issues, whatever they are. Hopefully they've figured some of these things out when that stretch begins. Put up or shut up time. It's nerve-wracking, but it's exciting. Of course, we'll cover that entire stretch and then some right here on the Locked On Kings podcast. I mentioned this before, but I'll reiterate it. I'm leaving tomorrow morning to go to Phoenix, Mesa, Arizona, to cover A's spring training for ABC 10. The A's, of course, coming to Sacramento, going to be very exciting. But I will be down there for a few games, including Saturday night when the Kings take on the Rockets. I do not know what my schedule looks like for that day. If I do a Locked On Kings podcast, it would be after I have time to watch the game later at the end of my work responsibilities. I don't know how that's going to go. So there is a chance I'm going to try everything in my power not to do this, but there is a chance that I do not have a post-game pod after that Rockets game. Just warning you ahead of time. But I'm going to do everything in my power to get you that content that you deserve. I'll be back on Sunday here in Sacramento, and then everything resumes as normal for the rest of this road trip and that big homestand coming up. So just so you know for that. But I appreciate your support as always, no matter what episode you are listening to. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.